I'm glad everybody's joined us today. We got a full house, and I'm very thrilled that everybody's been so committed to helping us transition our services over to distance and remote learning. And we have a variety of events this week, so be sure to be checking your email. We have this conference call, and then we've got some follow-on events this week that we'll go over later. But we're wanting to put together as robust a response as we can to support you. Y'all have been just completely amazing in terms of the information that you've been asking questions about, and that has helped us kind of determine a lot of things that we need to be able to provide you in terms of guidance and feedback. And today's phone call is going to be kind of part of the start for that. There's not many slides on this, and they're probably kind of a mess because we just threw them together. But what I've done is put together a lot of your new questions that have been coming in over the weekend and a little bit last week. And we're going to go through a lot of these, and then we're going to go through kind of some of the existing questions that we've already answered, but make sure that people know where to find the information. A great thing that we're going to have joining us to support is a group of practitioners, much like yourself, that are real experts in different ways of providing remote and distance learning. And so we have Tiffany Lee, Ashley Winkle, Glenda Rose, and Sasha Lovano that are going to kind of work as a help desk to support you guys on the nuts and bolts. I'm good at the policy stuff and the guidance and all that, but in terms of actual implementation, these folks are going to be way better positioned than I am. So they're on the phone call. They're going to help us field some of your questions today, and I can imagine that a lot of the discussion will be coming from them. So why don't we go ahead and begin here. And I'll begin just with some basic information that we've been catching on the emails from you. And I want to make sure that, Deb, if you could actually go over to the TCall splash page. I wanted to kind of walk through that just to remind everybody about that page. And everybody, while she's doing that, TCall has just been amazing in terms of responsiveness and support. So they just deserve all the kudos I can give them to help us turn this stuff around and get our web pages and stuff up.
So it's definitely a team effort.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. If you go to the TCall homepage, you'll notice that we've replaced the first page with a help page, a support page, and that changes every couple of days. So I would be definitely checking that thing first thing every morning and maybe last thing at the end of the day, because this is going to be our single point of feedback for providing you guys with up-to-date information on what we're doing. There's a student section at the very top there, and that's going to get built out quite a bit this week. What I'm wanting to do is have a specific student page that is something that adult learners as well as teachers can go to that has information they can do while they're at home. And I've just worked on it over the weekend in terms of just a rough draft. We may be reaching out to some of you for content, but it's going to be things like free and low cost or no cost learning resources. It's going to be non-educational resources such as how to find out the latest information on unemployment insurance, because many of our students may be becoming unemployed. There will be a section on the census. Remember, we have the census going on right now, and that's something that students can be doing while they're not working or while they're at home. And just information like that, where to go find school lunches, because there's a website you can go to that a student can enter their child's school name, and you can find out what time they're giving away free breakfasts and free lunches. And on that point, I've done that myself with my child. Those are open to the public. You don't have to be on free and reduced lunch. And they're just a drive up, and you can get a sack lunch, and it's fun. The students get to see their cafeteria workers, and it gets everybody out of the house for a few minutes, and you get some nutritional food. So the student page is coming along, and hopefully we'll have that up this week. If we scroll back up to the top, though, it's more of the information related to what you are working on. And we have a frequently asked questions document. You see there the first bullet. That gets updated every couple of days. We have a new version underway right now. The one that's up there was released Friday. And I'm going to be going from that one on some of the questions in a bit. But I hope to have another one out either this afternoon or tomorrow morning. And that's going to answer a lot more of the questions that we're going to go through today. You guys are going to probably ask a lot of good questions, and we want to make sure we can get those in writing, because a lot of you are relying on written communications to get support from your leadership. And then we're just going to have a wide variety of other information up there that I ask you to spend some extra time looking at. If you have general questions, send those to our AEL TA mailbox. It's down there under general questions. Those would be questions about COVID-19 services, questions in general. And those go to me, Mahalia, and Maria. And Maria's kind of the main point person, so her and I communicate on the questions, and then we start working them into the FAQs. Program-specific questions go to your program support specialist, Teams questions to Teams technical assistance, etc. So at the end of the day, check that website, and then below is a lot of the information that you guys have been looking at in terms of the distance learning supports and resources. If you look at the right there at the top left, you'll see a little thing that says DL Curriculum Volunteer Help Desk for Teachers. Deb, if you don't mind clicking on that. This is an awesome document that shows help desk support by specific curriculum. So you've got typically the representative from the company's curriculum, but then we've got teachers on there and other support people. So this is where Tiffany Lee's and Liz Moya's and Ashley Winkle's and these experts out there that you guys see eye to eye with on implementation are there to answer questions. Claudette Session out there from Beaumont on there, and you guys are awesome for giving your time out to help others out there. So check that little link out, and that'll give you some email addresses and the times they're available. So I'm going to go ahead and move back to the PowerPoint and start getting into the questions. And while Deb does that, are there any questions coming into the chat related to stuff I've just talked about?
I haven't seen any specific questions.
Okay.
Glenda Rose does say she's not on there for a specific curriculum, but if you need help with synchronous teaching, you know, having to go from a classroom teacher to a virtual teacher, she's happy to answer some of those questions. So I'll add that to that list and get that reposted.
Okay. All right.
But that's it so far. Yep.
Yeah, and we'll as we repurpose this page and revise it, we'll have the list of general remote learning subject matter experts listed up there also. I think it'll be a good idea. So let's go into this discussion on remote learning, and that's what I think we'll spend most of this call talking about, because it's kind of a brave new world for us. But we're very fortunate because we have some good expertise out there helping us. So let's start with some general definitions that we started to kind of work out last week on some of the phone calls, and we'll take questions on this. So I'm starting to use this term remote learning separate from the term distance learning, and we're very used to distance learning as the term we use. And these can be conceived as completely separate modalities or separate ways of teaching students. So so if we think of just distance education in the big picture, there's kind of two branches: distance learning and remote learning. Distance learning is the same as we've always understood it. It has a very distinct curriculum. It follows distinct data entry guidelines for proxy hours. There are so many hours a student has to do before you can include them as a distance learner, all these different elements. And that information, if you go to the FAQ, we will be having a question there on kind of where to find all the distance learning resources. And if you're new to distance learning, we're real happy to have you, and we will be able to have you find all kinds of information that you can find online on terms of what curriculum is approved and how to do the processes. One thing I can say that I was very encouraged by, I did a survey, and it looks like we have a very high percentage of students that are continuing to receive services via distance and remote learning. I forgot to say that earlier, but that's due to you guys. You have kept the trains running here as we've kind of had this big disruption in our daily lives. So I thank you for that. But it showed in our survey, which I posted on Twitter and LinkedIn and some other things, 40% of the programs are reporting that 50% of their students are still in services via distance or remote learning. So that's just phenomenal. And I think it'll grow as we kind of come out of this week and everybody gets better positioned. So back to remote learning as a topic. If distance learning has to use a specific curriculum and the hours are counted separate, a different way through proxy hours, the other thing that makes it unique is it can be what we would call asynchronous, meaning that learning can happen without an instructor. It can happen at night, in the morning, whenever, and somehow either through direct clock time hours or teacher mastery curriculum or these different models for collecting hours, the hours are collected as proxy hours. In remote learning, all of those things are quite a bit different. Remote learning doesn't necessarily have to use a distinct curriculum. And we have a question on the FAQ, so I'll work off of that. But it's question number 1 under remote learning on the FAQ, and you can just listen to me if you haven't pulled it up. But we're defining remote learning as learning that happens when a student and the instructor are working simultaneously but at a distance. So it's happening through email, discussion boards in real time, video conferencing, audio calls. It's happening in real time, but just the instructor and the teachers are separated by distance. So it doesn't happen in a physical classroom. It's using some sort of technology, and that technology can be anything that can be what we would call synchronous, meaning it's happening at the same time between the instructor and the students. The contact hours are considered direct hours if they're greater, 15 minutes or greater. So if you're working with a student for a period of 15 minutes or more on a phone, via a chat, via text, that would be considered direct hours because you're working just like you'd be working in a classroom, except you're not together in the same space. So that is that's kind of one of the bigger enhancements or the bigger changes we've seen under this remote learning discussion. And we're going to get a lot of questions on that. We have specific events this week that are going to be addressing that, and the people on this phone call are experts at it. So as you start to get that kind of sinking in, think about what questions you have, and we'll take those on in just a little bit. So that's our definition of remote learning, and just park that in your mind. The next question under the new questions on the PowerPoint, what is synchronous instruction? I just kind of defined it, but it's real-time instruction. So you have synchronous, which means right now, you and I, we're doing a synchronous event. It's happening at the same time. You're all hearing me, you're seeing me, and we are doing a synchronous event. Asynchronous, you put an A in front of synchronous, and that means things are disjointed by time. It's a recorded item, or it's something that's not happening in real time, and that would be considered asynchronous. So if those terms are new to you, they're not yet in the FAQ, but they'll be in the FAQ this afternoon or tomorrow. Next question, can a conference call with students serve as a form of direct hours? Yes. If there is a back and forth between the instructor in real time, and that lasts 15 minutes or more, we would consider that remote learning, and you'd be able to collect those hours. Any questions coming in? I know that's been a lot of content I've been going through.
No, I think they're just listening for the most part.
Okay.
They'll come through, I'm sure.
Yeah. We've had several questions on academic packets, course materials, programs, and I heard this from other states. They're running off mass, supplies of packets and giving them to students. How does that work, and is that considered proxy hours or direct hours, or what is it? We're saying because it's a packet and it's not a distance learning curriculum, it is not considered remote learning unless the teacher and the student or students are working via a conference call, a chat, or something on that packet. If not, it's just considered homework, and homework is not considered direct hours. So there has to be some sort of synchronous use of that course material if you're going to be using packets.
Anson?
Mm-hmm.
We do have a question. Can we offer remote teaching to the community?
Okay. So that question, and I saw that question come in. I think let me answer it by kind of forecasting what I think the individual is asking. If the question has to do with bringing in people that are not students right now, they're not current students, and teaching them, if that's what the question is about, which I think it is, we are working on guidance to allow you to bring in new students via distance. So that is something Mahaly and I are working on. I put together a fact sheet over the weekend, and it's getting reviewed right now. But that's going to be a topic to look forward to, and hopefully we'll have something out later this week on how do you bring in new students. And I'm glad the individual asked the question. We want to allow that, and I think last week on one of the phone calls, I said we were going to allow that, and I wanted to commit to that because we're in a very unprecedented time. There are people that are going to want to look for stability. They're going to want to look for a way to kind of use this time productively. They may have friends that are in your classes, and they're saying, hey, how do I get into the class? I want to do that too. I want to get my GED, or I want to get my learn more English, and I want to make that available. It disrupts many of the things that we do because we are used to brick and mortar based intake. We're used to eligibility testing. We're used to all kinds of different things that require face-to-face personal contact. We can't do that. But it doesn't mean we have to turn the lights out on new students. I'm thinking to the future. Wouldn't it be great to have hundreds or thousands of new people that haven't, been put into teams, but we've been working with them remotely in different formats over the next period of time. That'd be a great place to be, but it really does disrupt a lot of our processes. So look later this week. Thanks for the call or the question, and we're going to get guidance out on how to do that. But I think that's going to be an exciting place, but we need to build a little bit more structure around it. We want you to be best positioned to be able to offer that and to do it in such a way that makes the best sense, that's easiest for you in many ways, and that is something that your organizations will recognize as instruction and time worked for the teachers out there.
There is one more question.
Okay.
Excuse me. Can Mastery DL programs like USA Learns be used for packets that count as contact hours?
We had a question like that, and if someone can answer that, that's on the call while I pull up the FAQ. That question is currently on the FAQ. Let's see if I can find it.
Any of our DL experts on, would you like to answer that question? I can unmute you. You can unmute yourself.
This is Lori. So if you have an approved curriculum like USA Learns, you can do that. Those would be proxy hours.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Deb. This is Liz.
Hi, Liz.
Hi. I know that USA Learns does have packets, but these are printouts that are done as homework, and the students do this asynchronously, so it's more like a best practice. But I think that's what this person was referring to. I don't think they were necessarily referring to the online curriculum.
Ah, got it.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, so in the current FAQ, let me just read through that. It's question 20 on the current FAQ. USA Learns is on the approved distance learning list, but not in Teams. Can it be added to Teams? So this is a question about getting the curriculum in Teams, the distance learning curriculum. And it is approved. The answer is yes, it's approved, and it's going to be put into Teams. So the answer to that is yes, and you can check question 20. Liz, it sounds like what you're telling me is they also have hard copy materials, ancillary materials, and could those be used in homework? Is that correct?
Yes.
Or used for to collect hours. So they could be used if there's any kind of instructional materials, USA Learns or other instructional materials that are hard copy. We're not talking about computer-based. Those could count as remote learning if they're being gone through in real time with an instructor. So if the instructor has a chat and they're going through worksheets from USA Learns, answering questions, or they're doing that via a conference line, we would be collecting that and counting that as remote learning.
And Jeannie Hale has a question. If the teacher asynchronously introduces materials to students and we can track that student was able to log in and respond to instruction in Canvas, can that be considered direct hours?
I'm not as familiar with the learning management system Canvas, but probably the question to answer for yourself, for all of you that are thinking about these things, is it's not a question of can I see that the student accessed the materials at 8 o'clock last night. It has to go back to this synchronous discussion. Am I working with the student on those materials in a synchronous fashion? And if you can say yes to that, then yes, you are working synchronously. If you are just using Canvas to check whether the individual has accessed the materials or submitted the materials or uploaded the materials, and it's a snapshot in time, then no, that would not be considered synchronous learning.
So Denise or Rand, Denise, you're sending yours privately. If you can make it to everyone, that would be great. It says that Canvas can give a report like Zoom or WebEx, but Canvas is a learning management platform. It's not really an approved DL curriculum.
Right.
And then Glenda says the problem is that you can't actually be sure that the student did the work unless you are with the student in a, like in a live situation. Natalie,
yeah, I'm glad you said that. Let me respond to that real quick.
Sure.
One of the things I think I failed to say when I was talking about the synchronous activity and the remote learning is it happens in real time, but also the identity of the individual can be verified. So that's a little trickier with chat and stuff, but again, it does speak to the fact that the teacher has to feel relatively confident that they're talking to the student. Doesn't have to be 100% confident, because I don't think you're going to achieve that completely through things like chat and other things. What was the next question?
Tara had a question. How can teachers document, record direct hours when they teach remotely via Blackboard Collaborate?
So Mahalia is probably online here, and she had put together some feedback on capturing the hours. I'm trying to find the question in the FAQ.
So it sounds like what she's asking is they're using a tool like Zoom or Google Hangout for virtual teaching and just wanting how to document and record direct hours. I think last week, didn't you say something like if they took roll?
Yeah, so here's the question. It's question 17 on the current FAQ. Documentation of hours and activity for distance, remote, and app-based learning. So let me just walk through this, because not everybody's going to be able to read it, and know that it is on the FAQ currently.
I just posted it in the chat pod.
Okay, so without a physical sign-in sheet, how do we collect, the question was, without a sign-in sheet, how do we collect hours for remote learning, such as conference calls, Zoom classes, YouTube assignments? How do we monitor direct hours with apps and document these hours in Teams? What backup documentation would be needed for monitoring purposes? The answer, whether it's distance, remote, or app-based, all distance education activities must provide a method for participants and program staff to interact and participants to identify that the identification is verifiable. There are multiple ways to document hours and student activity for distance and remote learning. And this is information that actually is not new. So we have a reference back to the AEL assessment guide on state guidance for distance learning. And it says direct contact hours involved interaction between a participant and program staff in real time. Direct contact hours can be a combination of face-to-face contact as well as contact through phone, video, teleconference, online communication, in which the identity of the individual can be verified and the amount of time expended on the activity can be verified. Live online discussions, telephone calls, video live broadcasts, or remote locations are examples of direct contact hours. And then Mahalia's response goes on to say, that being said, providers must ensure that they update their local standard operating procedures to identify what is acceptable documentation of referenced non-traditional direct hours. So these could be roll call documents where the instructor does a roll call via chat, via weblog, via phone call, and basically takes roll online or on the phone, or printouts of those who have logged into webinars or video conferencing, much like the log that we have right here for this video conference, personal log of numbers provided to students with access codes and other types of documentation. So think about those methods. You can go back and refer to the FAQ. One thing I would want to say, and the FAQ references this, as you do this, keep in mind that a lot of the stuff we're doing could kind of dance us into some areas where we could be putting ourselves in jeopardy in terms of violating PII, personally identifiable information. So definitely, like in a web chat with other participants, you don't want to be asking, I mean, this is a flagrant example, but you wouldn't want to ask for an individual's social security number or even student ID necessarily as a form of identification. You might want to do that privately, but we want to be careful about how we do those kind of things. It could be easy to kind of waltz into some areas of noncompliance there. Tara, I hope that answered the question somewhat. And if anybody else has some examples of ways to document the hours and the logins and the activity, we'd be very happy to take those on this call right now.
Thank you. And as you can imagine, we still have some questions coming in. Natalie had a question: how do we document remote learning? Phone, email, text between instructor and student that lasts more than 15 minutes. I think you might have answered this question.
Yes.
I just want to make sure. Okay. Denise or Rand, we are using Zoom for instructors to deliver direct instruction, and we export reports to verify time and participants. Canvas, as well as Blackboard and Collaborate, are an LMS, but they're not an actual deal curriculum, but they do have reports that should be able to document participation. Ann Savino says from an email that she received, here's her question. So if I have an open phone call or a learning platform and ask the students to take time to do the following exercise, would that count? For example, it's not homework, we're live, and I ask them to take the time to do a following exercise. The line goes silent, but the students work.
Yes.
So that does count, correct?
Yes, that's essentially what happens in a classroom. Correct.
Correct. Let me see here. Majority of these platforms have report and audit exports that capture the time and duration. A great best practice is to also do attendance and roll call at the beginning of each call and update your SOPs for remote and, in case of technical difficulties, glitches that might happen during those circumstances. And some folks are just offering examples of taking roll: teacher log, platform report, a screenshot of the screen showing that everyone's name is in there. You can save the chat pod. You could use a Google form or a virtual sign-in sheet. I also want to mention we posted the link to the FAQs. I know we showed you where they are on the front of the web page, but I posted the link in the chat pod for all of you. Just know that it will continue to be updated.
Thank you. Let me pause right there, and that's completely very sufficient information. I mean, that's a lot of great stuff, and I appreciate everybody's contributions. And one thing I want to say is, so you're seeing all these different methods, but one of the things that we've got underscored in the FAQ response is you need to work, if you're a director at an adult ed program listening, or you're a leader of some sort, you need to probably, well, my advice is for sure, update your standard operating procedure or develop one on how you want instructors to do this, depending on maybe what platform they're using. That will help everybody at your institution know what the driving instructions are from your institution, and you would much rather have 2 or 3, 4 methods than 14 or 15 or 18 methods. Because at the end of the day, I always think that you're going to have to figure out a way to reconcile this for data entry and for collecting and reporting those hours. So if we look way down the road, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but at the end of the day, the question that the leaders and directors on this call need to ask themselves, and everybody else needs to be thinking about this themselves also. If someone were to say, 6 months from now, well, back on March 23rd, there were, 29 hours collected for this student. What is the evidence of those 29 hours that they were done direct hours through synchronous instruction on a phone call for the week of, for last week or whatever? And you want to have a good process. You want to have a good process that says, well, our procedure says that if they're using Canvas or if they're using Google Hangouts or if they're using a phone, this is the documentation, and this is how we can back it up. It's much easier to come up with those ideas for just a few options than to let every individual instructor kind of figure it out for themselves. So it might be a good period right now to take a breath for leaders and talk to your instructors, talk to your instructional teams, and come up with a process that everybody feels comfortable with. And then our group of experts here that have offered their time up for subject matter learning, subject matter expertise, as well as myself and others, you can bounce these things back off us for like compliance or if you feel if this is sufficient. But, you know, you want to think locally down the road, man, how am I going to make sense of this in February? Or how am I going to make sense of this, you know, this summer in August, you know? And that's something that we just want to kind of think about to the future. Okay. One thing I think what I want to do is maybe have some of our guests, Tiffany or Ashley or Glenda or Sasha or someone else, and I'll give you a few minutes to think this through because I want to answer some other questions, but I'd like to get some of you out there to kind of just talk through a process. What's the platform you use? How are you taking roll? How difficult is the technical assistance with students? I'm sure there's quite a bit of technical assistance happening to help students learn how to do this. So think through, and I'll see if anybody wants to kind of walk through an example. And then that'll probably help all the other listeners really feel excited about, like, here's how I could do it through Zoom, or here's how I could do it through a Blackboard, Collaborate, etc. So while some of y'all think about what you want to say, let me go through some of the rest of these questions that are on the screen quickly here. They're related, but a little separate from what we've been talking about. We've gotten several questions about faculty that have limited internet and computer access. And that is something that students, of course, are going to be struggling with also. But there is on that TCAL help or TCAL COVID-19 response page a whole section on free or low-cost service providers for internet services, and also information on data plans. So check that out for really the kind of infrastructure requirements that instructors would need, of course, but of course students are going to be looking for also. The next question 6 was on purchasing laptops and related computer supplies. So this is for the grant administrators out there. But last week, we released a new AEL letter. It's AEL letter 0520, and it has to do with added flexibility on purchasing computer and computer-related supplies, so that if you wanted to buy more laptops and you wanted to buy more supplies to help your instructors, we've opened up, we had some restrictions in the grants, a 15% cost restriction. That's been relaxed. There are still requirements related to prior approval for purchases, and there's guidance in that letter about prior approval, but if these costs add up for more, to be more than $5,000 for anything, it doesn't have to be computers and computer-related supplies, but any purchase, you need some prior approval from our grant management team. So for the directors out there, the people that are managing the funds, we've released, we've got some new guidance on that. Of course, our grants management team is there to answer your questions on purchases. By and large, many of y'all have funds to do this already. You already have distance learning licenses, so hopefully it's as simple as expanding your distance learning license user rates and getting that process through your finance office, which might be slammed right now, but at least we've tried to open up as much access as we can through our funding. So related to those, kind of going back to remote learning, is there anybody online that wants to give an example of a service they use, a platform they use, and how they're using that with students for our listeners?
Sasha, Denise Arayan, Glenda, feel free to unmute yourselves. We'd love to hear your stories.
This is Sasha. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so we're using Zoom, and the way that we started using it since last week is, number one, the whole classes are recorded, so they submit, at the end of their class, they submit it into a Google Drive, a copy of the actual class with a copy of the chat that already comes with it. Zoom is really good about that the chat just kind of comes with it. So we get a copy of the chat. So all of the students, when they come in, they put their name in the chat, and then as kind of a third eye, the IA logs into each class and then does a verbal roll call as well. Says, there's people on the list, so they verify kind of two ways: the chat box with the name, and then the verbal verification with the IA and the student. And then, of course, a copy of the recording that shows their faces and all that stuff.
Nice.
Awesome. Thank you very much there, Sasha. So anybody have questions for Sasha?
You can rate.
Oh, I'm reading the chat here. When you're done with Zoom, once it's over, as long as you told it to record, it's a section of the Zoom platform that says My Recordings, and there's usually at least 3 files: a video recording, an audio recording, and a copy of the chat that happens all together. So they just take that, download it, and then upload it into their Google Drive. It's automatic. What is participants, right?
This also might be a good opportunity to share that we're doing a webinar on Wednesday about 3 of these platforms that will go into an overview, and then they'll be doing a deeper dive, an hour and a half. I was just mentioning that if you want to get into some of these software virtual teaching programs like Zoom, or WebEx, Google Hangouts and such, we're doing a brief webinar, a 1-hour webinar on Wednesday, just giving an overview of each of those platforms. If you have not yet chosen a platform, I know in the chat pod, I can see a lot of folks, some folks are using Desire to Learn, some people are using Microsoft Teams, some people are using Zoom, and so on. I think Anson sent out some information, but we can send out some information again about upcoming webinars that we're having.
Okay. Hey, Deb, actually, I just sent it to you in your email. I made Maria made some PowerPoint slides for us. You want to pull those up?
Oh, wonderful. Yes, I will. Sasha, there was a question on how long are Zoom sessions? Is it a pro account? Is it free, and so on?
Well, I have purchased a personal pro account that I have, but because the 40-minute limit has been removed, the teachers are now all using it. They don't have to pay for anything on that. For the pro account, it does give you a few more bells and whistles, reports, and those kind of things that I use, but they don't necessarily need to use those. So we have a variety kind of happening. We have teachers who are very familiar with Zoom who are having 2.5, 3-hour Zoom classrooms, like full class. And then we have some who aren't, so they're due about an hour, and they'll just meet a little bit more often with their students as they get familiar with Zoom, and then the students get familiar with it. So I know that we're in the process of trying to contact Zoom to purchase Pro for our teachers, just because it's going to be more useful if this thing keeps going.
Deb, may I say something? This is Anne-Marie Molinari, if this is a good time.
Sure,
to give
Anne-Marie.
an example. Okay, so we are going to be, holding the session on Wednesday about the different tools, Zoom, and also we will be presenting on WebEx. And I wanted to just share some ideas on how to use these live webinar platforms and have teachers think about this in a different way. So we know that there are the approved distance learning curriculum where they're earning proxy hours. But then we have these free resources on the website, such as Common Lit, ReadWorks, the City University of New York, where there are math packets. So in order to create this learning environment, the teachers can hold these live virtual synchronous webinars with students and have the students interact with these learning packets, these reading passages online. So there's some really exciting things that can happen with all those free resources out there. So an example would be assigning a reading passage to the students before they meet live, and then going through the reading packet together with the students live. If it's an ESL class, they can practice their speaking. They can answer questions. If it's a math packet, the teacher can, in WebEx, assign the annotation tools to the student, and they can work through the math problem together with the students. And then lastly, I want to just share, Anson, an idea as far as WebEx. Another good, cool way is to take a verbal roll call in the chat pod and have the student take the teacher take a verbal roll call and then check off that everyone is present, and then take a picture of the chat pod and staple that with an attendance sheet as verification of the students that were there, and if that would work for direct hours.
Great idea. Great idea.
So
all right.
Those are my ideas.
Man, thank you, Anne-Marie. It's just, you guys are just full of creativity. I love it. Does anybody else want to walk through a software they're using? We heard Sasha give us a great example out there from Northside. Anybody want to showcase another platform?
Tiffany, didn't you say you were already using Google Hangouts? If you could share that, I'd appreciate it.
Ashley is using Google Hangouts. We're going to be using, our program's going to be using Zoom. I use Google Hangouts with our office staff. But you can use it for the students. Ashley's going to be using, demoing that on Wednesday. But for our platform for our teaching and learning, for the remote teaching and learning, I posted it in the chat box, but we're developing the procedures right now. And we're coming up to the final thing, but we're going to be using Zoom because as it reports, that user reports in the pro version. We sent out a Google form for the virtual learning survey. Jana sent out the form for the teachers to ask if anybody wants to teach over the time that we're away. And from that survey, we're going to make a schedule. And from that schedule, we're going to ask the teachers what times are they available and what lesson are they going to teach. And then we're going to set up the Zoom meetings where we're going to have facilitators, either me or another teacher is going to be on the call. So make sure that all that technical support is there for them and any other questions they have with that. So the content will be aligned to we're trying to see if we can get the content aligned to the distance learning programs of what we use in the essential education with GD Academy and then Burlington English. And then with the attendance tractor, we're going to see about the Zoom has the usage report because we do have the paid program with Region 9, but maybe we can do it like as a virtual sign-in sheet, where we just post the link in the chat box and then they go to the link and they type their last name and their first name and put the time in that they were there.
Awesome.
I wanted,
go ahead, Deb.
I'm sorry. So we did have some other offers to share. Denise
Okay.
Arand is sharing, is using Burlington English that she'd be happy to share, Denise, if you want to unmute yourself. And then Glenda can talk about WhatsApp, which is another tool that she's using.
Right. So I was just going to say that Burlington English, since they extended that we could utilize the core, where before that was just a pilot project with a limit, the way the core program is set up, it made it much easier, since we had to do this so quickly, for me to talk to the instructors about the in-class lessons being basically your live or direct instruction. So they're doing that portion in Zoom, so that they can go in, and some things do have to be altered a little bit because the in-class lessons were designed to be done face-to-face, but for the most part it really kind of gives them something, and you can walk the students through, and the instructor can walk them through the in-class lesson in something like Zoom or whatever method you're doing to deliver the direct instruction, and then show the students how to go in and do the student lessons outside of class for the proxy hours. And so that's a good model. I wish we had that model in more distance learning, but I'm sure we weren't pushing for it before the way we need it so desperately now. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Denise.
And Denise, you also shared that the session is full for Wednesday already.
It is full, 250.
Was there someone else that was going to share a example?
Glenda?
Okay.
So I was going to share using WhatsApp for a live class, because we're talking mostly about video, and sometimes that can be problematic with the web conferences for students. Even when I do video, I have the WhatsApp Desk app on my computer because it's my backup in case something happens to the internet or a student gets kicked out or something like that. But you can use it for a live class. The first time I realized that, I was on a plane and I realized I had to teach a class. So we did it from WhatsApp from the plane. And it works really well, especially if you're on the desktop, because you can share audio, video, documents, and people can work in real time. Remember that the rule for direct hours is that it has to be in real time. So you'll have to show on the screenshots that the students were engaged for whatever period of time you're giving them the direct hours for. I'm going to try it today with a very unusual situation. I have an integrated EL Civics Microsoft Office certification class, and obviously I at the workforce center where they were using computers are closed, and I don't want them here. Most of them have laptops at home at this point. They may not have at the beginning of the class, but they do now. And so we are going to have a live class on WhatsApp, and I will use Zoom to work one-on-one with them if they get stuck in the training content. So I'll let you know how that goes and see if that works or not. But they seem to be happy with that idea, and I think this particular group, it'll work really well.
Super.
I should also, one of the reasons I use WhatsApp, it is encrypted end-to-end. So you don't have to worry as much about leaking PII outside by text or something like that. It is encrypted end-to-end.
Great. Let me say a word real quick as we kind of regroup back to questions. If there's anybody listening that is really not doing any distance or remote learning because you don't have the capacity or the expertise or the software or whatever, please find a way to let me know. You can either email me directly or you can text me. You can contact somebody at T-Call, but I want to make sure no one's falling through the cracks. And I would not be surprised if we have people that are really scrambling to get something put together. Everybody talking on the phone and in this session are just doing phenomenal work, and so it would be very easy to feel outgunned. And thus you might not want to even ask a question. Find a way to get the information over to me somehow, either through your program support specialist, any of the email addresses you've ever seen. People can get a hold of me, and then we will reach out and specifically help you get up to speed to some extent. So don't be ashamed to reach out like that, or don't feel like you're out of compliance or anything like that. There's nothing like that happening. But we want to help, and this is a very advanced group talking on here, and sometimes that can make you feel like, man, I can't ask a question, and I don't want you to feel that way. So let's go back to questions. Has anybody seen any questions, or do you want to propose any questions? We have about 15 minutes left here.
A lot of information.
Definitely, and I wanted to let everybody know as we kind of think about other questions as we wind down. I definitely, if you're an instructor out there, for sure, reach out to your students about unemployment insurance. We have information on our website, and it's currently a very busy time. Several of my staff have offered and will most likely be getting pulled into working on unemployment insurance support this week because we are dealing with just tremendous loads. So I want to thank them for offering to take some of their time from AEL and move over to Unemployment Insurance Help Desk. But that's something we definitely want to make sure that students know about. They're dealing with all kinds of things. If you talk to them and they say, oh my God, I called, but I waited forever and no one ever spoke to me, tell them that that our calls have increased just dramatically. The governor has spoken about that. I mean, he has. We're in a major unemployment crisis right now in terms of responsiveness and in terms of need. So patience is worthwhile for sure, but TWC is basically turning a lot of its effort, including staff members, to work on these topics and to help people get their unemployment insurance claims processed. But I know of multiple people already that have had either personally or in their households had people lose jobs. So that's just going to continue to happen, and our students are going to be very vulnerable to that, as you can imagine.
Anson, we have a question regarding testing. I know you mentioned it last week, but we might want to bring that up again. Some of our students did not score well on the TABE and need to be retested. I would rather not. Can we simply add them to our remote learning delivery model and work with them through this platform? Yes. If you have existing students that have, are not doing well or have not progressed well, for sure, let's get them into a remote mode and help them out that way. Absolutely. And I saw some question about performance. Yeah, someone wants to know how anything's going to affect performance. Yeah, I think it goes without saying that performance in just about everything TWC does is going to be impacted. And we had a lot of email discussion, the leadership did over the weekend related to this. We have some statements about performance that we are going to be releasing to this week, most likely, just to let you know. Essentially, there's not much we know right now is the bottom line. This is all happening very quickly, and the federal government is just now kind of trying to, figure things out themselves. But typically, we've had major hurricanes. I've been through 9/11 hurricanes, recessions, and we always get some sort of a special method of reporting the students, as well as some sort of any kind of forgiveness we get on performance or something. We would definitely, of course, work down to you at the local level. I think I said in the last call last week, let's not let that cloud our vision of providing support to students in the community. You're in an unprecedented time. There's going to be lots of changes related to business as usual
So things like post-testing and all of that, it's just impossible to do. So let's not even think about that. Just know that I'm going to give you the most up-to-date information as I learn it. And we'll be advocating our unique needs, because we have some unique needs. You know, every program does. And the workforce boards are getting slammed right now with just processing unemployment support. So it's a different environment. Don't let performance worry you. Think more about how can I get services out, but how can you do it in a logical way with your leadership, kind of in concert with your leadership, so that it's more. I think when things are streamlined, we tend to want to rush and do things on our own to be responsive, because that's how most of us are built. But it is good to kind of spend a few minutes extra time with leadership to make sure you can get a plan built that helps out in the long run for your program and for other individuals in your program. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, Jamie Heredia has a question. I use Remind to help my students with directions on how to log into Burlington English, etc. Will the communication I have with my students through this platform be counted as direct hours or proxy hours? Thank you.
My gut feeling is it would be neither, because any type of interaction with Remind, unless it is going over 15 minutes, I don't think you can really consider that instruction. If you're just telling somebody how to log into something, or it's more ad hoc support. That's my initial response.
And Karen Blue is asking, for you folks that are already doing this, implementing this virtual teaching, what's the participation rate? Are you getting half of your students participating, all of them, more or less? Any of you that are already participating? Yep, good.
So far, the ones that we've had, now we just had a few teachers who started it last week. We were all in the learning process last week, but I've already had some today, and the response really has been great. I would say about 60 to 70% of the students come on, and they stay. So, and that, I think that's just going to increase here as we kind of go forward in this, because they, you know, some of them, they logged on, but then they lost internet, or maybe they couldn't figure out how to unmute themselves, or so. Over this next week, I know that I've told all of my teachers to really focus on their health of their students, how are they doing, and teaching them how to use these things. Yes, we're going to go over Burlington, and we're going to go over Skills Tutor and TABE Tutor, but that's not going to be the focus this week. It's really getting the students acclimated to this whole new way of learning. So we've had a lot of students get on, and they're really excited to see each other and see their teachers. So I think that's the great thing, is they want to come back.
That's awesome. I'm also putting a link to the help desk for each of the different curriculum providers in the chat pod. It is on the website, but you could have that open and bookmark if you like.
Okay, awesome. Somebody asked, and I'll go ahead and let y'all know, and I thank you guys for the feedback you're giving on the support my team's given for unemployment insurance. So the team that's volunteered so far is Maria Moro, Mahalia Baldini, Lori Slayton, Ann Savino, Fabiana Ramirez, Veronica Moore, Elena Zachman, and Blanca Saldivar. So it's pretty much almost my whole team. We're still waiting to see exactly what assignments will be made. Several of them agreed to do it Saturdays and Sundays also, because we're trying to support 24/7 on these things. So next time you see them or email them, thank them for their service and doing that. Way many years ago, I did that for Hurricane Katrina. We ran the unemployment insurance system for Louisiana at the time of Hurricane Katrina, as you can imagine. And I sat and answered phone calls for a week and a half And it was very interesting work. One thing I was going to show kind of related to, we have just a few minutes left here, related to the feedback you guys had on percentage of students. I'm going to try to share my screen here. So this is, I posted this on Twitter and stuff, and some of y'all saw this. This was from the survey I pulled Friday last week. And this is the question: what percentage of students do you estimate are continuing to receive services through distance learning or remote learning? And you can see it's just a tremendous amount. So I was expecting it to be, not to take anything away from you guys, but between the 5 and 10% as being the highest amount. So that's quite a bit. And that's like, I want to say like 50 programs responding. So that was like a 24-hour turnaround almost on a survey. So lots of responsiveness. Thank you. But lots of uptake. I mean, I can tell you there, you know, I think I mentioned this last week. We have a lot of states that have no distance education happening. And right now they're just getting zero contact. So I didn't realize that things were in such bad shape for some of the states in terms of distance education, but we seem to really got it down. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap this up. And
again, on behalf of TWC, I really appreciate all of you being on, and I would just like to commend all of you at TWC for all the hard work that you're doing to keep us posted in getting all of these programs online. So thanks, everybody. Thank you, Anson.
Thank you. Y'all have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.